Okay. Okay, it is 6:30, so I will call the meeting to order and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On to roll call, Mayor Kratzky, I am present. Moko?
Present.
Groko?
Present.
Fall? Absent tonight. Padilla?
Present.
And Eager.
Here.
We have one change for tonight's agenda. Under 11F, we will add the final pay request for the Oaks Lakeside Pavilion. And then I'll take a motion to approve the agenda for tonight.
So moved.
We have a motion by Eager. Can I
I'll
get a-
second it.
Seconded by Groko. Any further discussion about the agenda? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to comments, updates, and concerns. Do we have any citizens here that would like to speak tonight? Assuming your daughter doesn't want to chime in. Any updates from council members? And any updates from city staff?
Just wanted to share, in reference to RS Fiber, last night the Joint Powers Board met, and they did agree to hire a bankruptcy attorney. And so they did take that action last night. It was actually an attorney that Mark had recommended, and so that worked out. It was a good conversation, good discussion. I think all the cities but one was present last night.
Okay.
I think, yeah, one city was missing. That's the only update I have.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that. I feel like that's our best option at this time to get more information from an attorney, so thank you very much. Okay, any other updates? Then we'll move on to tonight's consent agenda and take a motion to approve it.
So moved.
We have a motion from Eager. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Padilla. Any discussion about the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We have a public hearing at 7. We'll come back to communication requests and petitions. We have information about St. Michael's Fall Festival in our packet. And we can move on to department committee reports and action items. The first one on our agenda is Public Works. So, yep, there you are, Ty. Come up to the podium and give us updates. First thing is the inflow and infiltration project.
Yeah, good evening. So I sent out 2 requests for quotes and only received one back. That was from Empire Pipe Services. And this is for 20 blocks of sewer main. The quote received was just over $43,000. It'll cover all but 6 lineal blocks of the whole entire West Lift Station area. The question, I guess, I know we predicted 56 to 60,000. Do we just want to do those extra 6 blocks and be done with it? I did call him this morning and just see if he'd be willing to do that, and he would be, so.
I think that's a smart idea, just to finish them out.
Just finish it out, okay.
I had the same initial thought right away. Then we got that whole zone.
Done,
We'll see
yeah.
the immediate, or see how much improvement.
Right.
I just wanted to ask, do you see any issues with that as far as we went out for quotes on this? The other one didn't even give us, we solicited, but they didn't give us one, so as far as adding more on to this?
Sorry, I was getting up to speed on the packet here. So we have a quote from one company, 2 companies?
Solicited 2 quotes or 2 companies, we only received one, and we obviously put in the request for quote, the scope of work. So now we're gonna add to that scope at this stage. Is that okay?
Well, assuming that the quote is for under the threshold for public bidding, you know, that having multiple bids is a best practice to just make sure that the city is getting good quality bids. So in terms of the formalities you have to observe, they aren't as rigid. And so I'm not sure that the city is necessarily hamstrung by, you know, having to update this. But as a rule, I know the city has always tried to get as many quotes as possible. This is kind of a unique circumstance. So I wouldn't necessarily have any hesitation about moving forward with this. as long as we're confident that, these are good bids and, good contract we can move forward with.
How much was the extra?
The extra 6 blocks would probably bring us right up to 56,000.
Okay, so we need a motion to approve the quote from Empire Pipe Services for sanitary sewer televising in the amount of approximately $56,000, or how do we don't know the exact amount.
It should, I calculated it up, it should be right at 56,000.
Oh, perfect,
So,
okay.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Padilla, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Groko, any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we have snow hauling quotes for the 2024-2025 snow season.
yeah, so we did receive 2 quotes for snow hauling this year. One from Lasky Trucking, the other from Circle F Farms. The Lasky Trucking quote was for $120 per hour per truck. And then the Circle F Farms quote was for $135 per hour per truck. And that was Circle S Farms, that was who we usually use, and that's the same as his quote from last year, but Lasky's a little bit cheaper this year, so we're recommending to go with Lasky Trucking for this year.
We're looking for a motion to approve the quote from Latsky Trucking at $120 per hour.
So moved.
We have a motion from Eker, do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Padilla, any questions or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Ty.
That's all I have, unless anybody's got any questions of me. All right, thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to the police department after our public hearing. So we'll move on to the city engineer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just by way of introduction, Justin Black, City Engineer. The first agenda item related to city engineering is the final payment for the stormwater riprap project. And maybe before I get into that, just a brief description of the project. As you recall, last late winter, early spring, we had a contractor come in and put riprap around the stormwater pond that's out on the east side of the city. About a year ago, we were talking about either doing the project in 2 phases or 1 phase. And if you recall, we did it all in 1 phase. So this project effectively completed all of the riprap work out on that stormwater pond. So it's a great project to check off the list and have done. There was some restoration work that they needed to complete this summer on the trail and some turf restoration out there. So they completed that. And we just recently received what we call the closeout documentation for the contractor. So that's why we're bringing this application for payment, the final one, to you at this point in time in October. The amount due on the application is $24,167.74. We've reviewed it and we're recommending approval. The project did come in under budget. It came in about $50,000 under budget, so that was great news when we got everything all wrapped up. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, looking for a motion to approve the final payment.
Justin, we had fabric behind all that riprap, correct?
We did. We had fabric behind there, and they placed the rocks up against the bank in that fabric. And that was one of the reasons why we came in under budget is some of them banks were hollowed out quite a bit, so we want to make sure we had enough budget to place rocks all the way back into the bank. And they fit in there real nicely, and things worked out well, so came in on track.
Anyone like to make a motion to approve the stormwater pond? We have a motion from Eker, do we have a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Groko, any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Now we can move on to the street and utility improvement project.
All right, the next item is related to this past summer's street and utility improvement project. This is also a final payment to the contractor, to Nielsen Blacktopping. The payment amount for this application is $85,500. $593.60. We've reviewed the pay application, and we are recommending approval. A couple other notes to add regarding this project. I think I mentioned at the last meeting, Ty and myself and the contractor did a walk through the entire job site, developed a punch list. They've corrected all those things, and overall, project turned out very well. The project did come in under budget. So just a little bit more detail on that, with including all of the costs in this final payment to the contractor, we're about $158,000 under budget. Just a little bit of a breakout on that, categories of how we came under budget. The project-related costs, the engineering, the surveying, the material testing came in about $20,000 under budget. Part of that was just the pace at which the contractor moved. We had expected the project to take longer than it did. Even with the rainy weather, they were able to keep things moving, and the timeline was just shorter, so there was less time for us to be out on site, and things came in under budget from that perspective. The other under budget piece came from the construction itself, about $93,000 under budget on construction. And the last piece is the contingency. Because we were under budget, we didn't use any of the contingency. So this particular project had about a 3% contingency, $45,000. So we didn't use any of the contingency, so we could put that in the category of being under budget. So about $158,000. I know Stephen mentioned the question has come up, what about the assessments? And should we be looking at reducing assessments for the project? In the past, this is not something we've done. Other projects have come in under budget, maybe not to this extent, but we have not gone back and reduced assessments. We've had projects that have come in over budget, and in the same spirit, we've not held another assessment hearing to increase assessment values. If we would go down the path of looking at a reduced assessment amount, a couple of things, we would have to hold an assessment hearing, so we'd have to go through that process again. We just couldn't reduce the amounts administratively. The other thing worth noting is the $160,000 would not all be applied to an assessment reduction. We would follow the city's assessment policy. Now, the city's assessment policy assesses 25% for streets. So in round numbers here, we're about $160,000 under budget. If we would apply the policy, 25% of that would be $40,000. So $40,000 would be, in round numbers, would be the amount that would be applied. There's 32 properties or 32 parcels in the project. So that just gives you a sense of what we'd be talking about for a reduction. So it wouldn't be the full $160,000. That would be an instance where we'd be assessing 100%, and we're just not doing that. So with that, be happy to answer any questions about the final payment or any questions about any of the other things that I talked about.
You talked about the street assessment, what was the alley? The alley assessment was less too, wasn't it?
The alley assessment was 25% per side.
Okay.
Yep.
Versus the city guidelines was higher than that, wasn't it? Wasn't it 35%?
It was higher, and we reduced it. That's correct.
So,
yes.
so right now, what the city taxpayers got was 10% lower than what our regular rates are as a break, and then they got sent the original letter that said, hey, this is what our estimate is.
Yes.
And then they got a letter saying, hey, the lowest bid came out at this, and so this is what your assessment's gonna be.
That's correct. After the bid openings, we did reduce it from our original estimate. So we had a preliminary estimate that we shared early on, and that was a reduction because we adjusted the policy. So we reduced it once, and then we reduced it a second time after we opened bids, because as you recall, we got really, really good bids, really aggressive bidding on this project, and we reduced it a second time.
I just think that there's, might have been some confusion because people have been asking, because they did pay their payment before, you know, in June, before interest started to accrue on
Yep.
and then they see this in the paper that,
Right.
you know, it came in way under
Yes.
bid. They're asking, well, if I made this payment before this project was complete, how do they know what was assessed was right?
Yep.
So,
The assessment values are correct per the city's policy and per the policy that you laid out. And I understand it's a fair question. It's a fair question.
There's no other questions. We need a motion to approve the 2024 street overlay project application for payment number 5 in the amount of $85,593.60.
So moved.
Motion from Eker. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Groko. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to 9H3, we have the Lake Titlow Dam Replacement Project outlined.
So I'll refer you to a handout that looks something like this in your packet. I'll let you maybe catch up to that piece of it.
95 in your packet.
So this is an outline that we had prepared. I had met with Steve and the Lake Titlow Committee here about a month ago and reviewed this information with them. And this is based on some timelines of work that needs to be completed before we can move into construction of a dam project. And if the council would indulge me, I'd like to just take a couple of minutes just to go through each of the line items. On the left-hand side, we have the date, and then the corresponding months, and then on the right-hand side is the task that needs to be completed. So we're starting out here in January of 2025. So we've got a timeline here of a few months, January to April, where the city needs to complete the grant application and enter into a grant contract with the Minnesota DNR. So that's part of the $500,000 grant dollars that the city received, and that's an important step to enter into that contract so that you can start using that money and spending it on developing this project. The next step that we have outlined in April is a topographic survey. So up to this point, we don't have any detailed measurements or survey information out on the dam. We've just been looking at it from an aerial photograph point of view. So this would be a good next step is get some measurements, get some details on what's out there now, what are the elevations, what are the grade drops through that corridor. And April's a great time of year to do that because the snow is melted, but the leaves aren't on the trees yet. So we can get back in that area and do that work. Following in May and June, we would complete some delineations, both a wetland and habitat delineation. And then on the heels of that, in the summer months, moving into fall, we would complete some preliminary engineering design. So using some of the information we gathered in the survey and the delineations, we could put together some actual preliminary design of what this dam footprint might look like and what the structure itself would look like. And at that point, we'd update the cost estimate. We'd have more information and could provide a more detailed cost estimate. We'd also take a look next fall if we need some additional borings. I believe there's 2 borings out there already, but based on the footprint of the structure and how deep we might need to go with the pilings, we might need a couple more soil borings. At that point, we've got a preliminary plan, if you will. We would pause for a moment and meet with the DNR that winter and review the plans. Ultimately, the plan needs to be approved by the DNR. So we'd want to get some comments back from them on the preliminary plan and then incorporate them. Moving into calendar year 2026, that's when we'd complete the final engineering design and cost estimates. And once that's completed, we could apply for some of the permits, the Army Corps of Engineers permit. You'll see the timeline on that is quite long, February to November. Those permits take anywhere from 6 to 12 months. And then there's a dam safety and public works work permit, public waters work permit through the Minnesota DNR. So we complete the permitting late 2026. The last couple line items there, that would put us in a good position to bid the project winter of 2027 for construction in 2027. So we laid out a bunch of steps here, taking it kind of one piece at a time, updating cost estimates along the way in order to look at a project that's out a couple of years. I guess with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about this. And as we move through the process, we'll continue to update the schedule and update the council.
Just, Justin, what are your thoughts? I was by there the other day, there's no flow out by the dam right now. And I don't know how accurate information you're looking to get with, how deep the pool is between the box culverts and the dam. We have a good working relationship and agreements in place. Is it, the next month or so with the leaves coming off already, would it, with no flow out there, spring would be a different story? Would it
Right.
be a good idea maybe to look if there is time to get that information?
I think you raise a good point. You're right, in the spring, we may have higher flows. I guess that's something we could definitely take a look at and have a discussion with Steve on how we could structure that, and come back to the council with something, but,
Is it that important, that stretch, how deep is it there,
yes. It would, in my mind, the more detailed information you get, always the better. And if we can get out there right now with no flow, I think it'd be good. It would probably be E.G. Rude that'd be doing the work as a city surveyor, so maybe that's someone that Steve would want to talk to as far as timing of completing the work versus issuing cost to the project. So that's something we could look at. But I think if we could get it done now, that would be great. Steve, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, we would just have to make sure that we're not being billed at this point in time, because that's one of the prerequisites to this grant, is that we cannot expend, or anything that we expend is not qualifying expenses under the program, the appropriation. So until we enter a contract, nothing qualifies as far as reimbursables. So we have to be careful with that. We'd have to make sure we have a good understanding with any work that's being done, that we would not be billed until such time that we enter a contract with the state.
Good point.
Any other questions on the schedule? I know we're looking at a project here that's a couple of years out. That's always hard to envision, but at the same time, we wanted to provide some organization and some next steps that we could follow as we look ahead. And I know the question has come up a couple of times, what about the cost? The cost estimate that's been prepared is already a year or 18 months old. We will update that cost. We just, at this point, feel that it'd be prudent to do some of this preliminary engineering work and then update the cost so that we could have a little bit more accurate numbers. Right now, we're really guessing, since we don't have any detail on what's out there right now.
I guess this evening, what I'm looking for is if this outline, this schedule is acceptable. One of the big things I'd have to move on then is the application with the DNR. That is going to take us some time to complete. And so I'd start working on that right away, so we're ready in the spring. One of the questions that seems to come up often too is, when do we have to have the project completed by? And the DNR to date has not given us a definitive answer on that. They've actually went as far as to say that once we enter an agreement, if we don't meet the deadline, whatever is identified in the agreement, that we have an opportunity to actually extend that. There might be more than one opportunity, in fact. So they don't want to extend it indefinitely, obviously, but they're not giving us a deadline as far as completion of the project at this point in time, anyway. So, but when we do enter an agreement, there will be a time frame that will be defined for completion.
So tonight, you're just looking for consensus that we're all okay with the timeline, correct?
Yes, if this is acceptable, this outline, basically just a consensus would be fine. That would be direction to the staff then that we would start moving ahead based on this schedule.
Seems like everyone's in agreement, so.
Seems like the biggest holdup is the Corps of Engineers getting their permit.
Yeah, that's a long timeline there. So that's one of the reasons why it was good to put the schedule together, so that we make sure we get everything completed and permits submitted to them and plenty of time for them to review it.
Awesome.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, we have about 6 minutes before our public hearing. Do you think we can, probably can't do our financial plan, but can we move on to like 11B?
Sure, I agree, sorry.
Okay.
This is in reference to, this is a resolution number 2024-32. It's a resolution authorizing membership in the League of Minnesota Cities 4M Fund. The city has actually identified the 4M Fund as one of its depositories. We do that annually that's one of the, part of the resolution that we do with like our annual appointments and other things. We've just not participated in the program over the years. We've identified it. The 4M Fund has been around, I don't know, decades. It is a financial option. Basically, it works a little, it's not like a CD where you basically invest in that CD for a term. It's kind of like a bank account, if you will, where you basically deposit monies into it, and then you can withdraw them as needed. So there's a difference there. But basically, that's how it works. The interest rates these days in the 4M fund are very competitive with CD rates. So that's part of the reason I started looking at this more closely. And so the resolution that's in your packet is actually a resolution drafted by the league. It's their template. And so this is a requirement in order to participate in the program. There is mention in it of what they refer to it as the business, let's see, there's certificate of business trust. I didn't include it in your packet, though I do allude to it that it will be part of the resolution. I didn't include it because it's so big. It's about 30 pages long. And so I did talk to the league, and we can just simply include it with the resolution, but I just wanted to let you know, it's theirs. It's not something we had drafted, it's theirs. We have to, they ask us that we include it in there. But basically, it's what created the 4M fund. So with that, I guess if there's any questions, I'll entertain those.
Questions? So tonight you need a motion to authorize membership?
Yes, so that resolution, that's basically what it does. It allows us to participate in the fund.
Okay. So looking for a motion to authorize resolution number 2024-32, authorizing membership in the League of Minnesota Cities 4M fund.
It doesn't mean we have to put any money in there.
Correct, it's just an option. It's just another one of our options as far as investing city funds.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2024-32, authorizing membership in the League of Minnesota Cities 4M fund.
We have a motion from Padilla. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Groko. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, still have a few minutes. I think we can move on to 11D. That's gonna be quick. Thanking Jim Swanson for his years of service.
So, yeah, Jim has provided his resignation from both the Lake Tidlow Beautification Committee and the Parks and Rec Board. As you probably all are aware, Jim moved out of town, they sold their home, so he's no longer living in.
Happy for them, but we're gonna miss them.
Yeah, very active over the years.
Oh, good for all of Jim's years of service, and be willing to dedicate our meeting to Jim Swanson for it, so. Maybe that'll make the paper, maybe it won't, we'll see, I guess.
No? Well, we'll.
Sorry, Jim.
We'll let Jim know the meeting was dedicated to him, so. So we need a motion to accept Jim Swanson's resignation from the Lake Tidlow Beautification Committee and from the Parks and Recreation Board. And in doing so, of course, we want to thank Jim for his years of service.
So moved. Second.
Motion from Groko, seconded by Eager. Any further discussion or comments? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now we can probably get ready to jump back to our public hearing. Get to the right page. Okay, so I will open tonight's public hearing. It's regarding the proposed ordinance number 368, amending 72.01 to allow golf carts and ATVs to be driven after sunset if they are equipped with working headlights, taillights, and turn signals. So I don't know, Charlie, if you want to come up to the podium, because you might be part of this conversation.
Certainly.
Okay. Either you or Steve want to present?
Go ahead, Steve, you're the master.
Well, as you recall, we had, this was actually something that was initiated by a resident here in town that was requesting be able to utilize their ATV after dark, after sunset. And so council agreed to take a look at it and also discuss then from there as far as what changes that we could make to the ordinance. And so this was the language that the council did consent to basically allow for ATVs and also golf carts to extend the period of time when they can operate on city streets, basically, after sunset. And basically, you stated that they could do so if they have working headlights, taillights, and turn signals. So those are the things that you added into our city code that would allow for such. So that's basically the extent, that change, and then that last segment, this is on page 70 of your packet, we eliminated then as far as the language in respect to incremental weather, just took that all out. So that's the only changes that were made.
Any questions from council?
Oh, pardon me, I missed one. Charlie pointed out. Permits, we changed that they would be renewed every 3 years versus annually. I think we'd actually done that.
That's
in
already
our-
been
Yeah, I feel like we've already done that.
We did it
They sent
in,
out updated.
we did it in our fee schedule. We didn't do it in the ordinance itself.
That sounds correct.
So it's good that we're picking that up. It was something was overlooked.
I have a question under C, specifically C2, where it says you gotta submit a certificate signed by a physician. If they have a driver's license, they have some sort of medical condition, isn't that gonna show up under their driver's license where the medical condition's already been approved by a doctor so they can have their driver's license? I guess I don't understand why we're going specifically through that procedure.
Well, I guess that's, yeah, it's a good question. That's always just been in the ordinance. I guess we just kind of overlooked it. I can't think of a scenario where somebody would not have a valid driver's license, but the doctor would say, oh, but yeah, you can drive a golf cart or an ATV, right? That's what you're getting at?
Well, if they have a driver's license, they have to meet medical. You know, if they have something that's precluding them medically, like they have seizures or something, they have to be cleared by a doctor to have a license.
Right.
I
Yeah, the
think
way-
I think it's for circumstances where they don't have a driver's license, because it says or.
I thought that they had to have a driver's license to be driving these.
So it says right now that the applicant will either currently hold a valid driver's license or submit this doctor's.
We're going above and beyond to give somebody perhaps the opportunity. Doesn't have a license, a different path.
Correct.
No.
Is that legal?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is something worth discussing otherwise, but just to be clear, it's an either or.
Were we
proposition.
trying to catch like other forms of motorized, like scooters in this same ordinance?
The only, I mean, I guess what initially comes to my mind, and maybe I'm wrong, is somebody that's elderly that isn't safe to operate a motor vehicle, you know, a big piece of machinery going 30 miles an hour down the road, but if grandma wants to get on a golf cart that goes 5 miles an hour, you know, and she has a note from a doctor saying, I can't imagine, I guess I've never seen anything like that, you know, but, you know, grandma can operate a golf cart that doesn't exceed, you know, 10 miles an hour or something. I mean, other than that, I guess I don't know, yeah, what else would fall into that category.
No, no.
I would rather just have that.
Yeah, I think we should take that out.
Stick with the license, driver's license.
Yes,
Sounds
Safer.
yes.
Thanks, Mark, for picking up on
Okay, any other questions?
So that would be that whole number 2 all the way to the end.
Yep.
Well,
No,
No.
you gotta have proof of insurance.
Just where the period
Oh,
is?
wait, sorry.
after designated?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, we want that last sentence.
And then take it out of the last sentence, the copy of physician's certificate.
I'm sorry, say that again?
It just references the physician statement in the last
Oh, right there.
sentence, so you just
Yeah.
gotta.
Any other questions from council or staff? Does not look like we have anyone here from the public to comment, but if there is someone from the public that would like to comment, now is your opportunity. Okay. Then at this point, if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
We have a motion from Eker. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Groko. Any further comments or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so now we can move to 9D1 on page 81. And we need a motion to adopt ordinance number 368, an ordinance amending chapter 72 recreational or other vehicles with the changes made tonight.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion from Padilla. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Moko. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you.
Now we can move on to 11A, our 2024 through 2029 financial plan draft update, and we have Annette here from ABDO. Welcome.
Good evening. Annette Storm with ABDO. I have been working with staff to update the long-term plan for the city for the years 2024 through 2029. I'll just kind of walk you through the plan. I know this is kind of the third year in a row you've kind of seen it, so we'll just kind of keep it high level, and then if there's any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. So on the actual plan, I'm going to start on page 18, which is the presented capital funds that have kind of some capital activity. We'll just kind of high level go through, as there wasn't a whole lot of changes from the previous year. So we'll start on page 18 with the Special Police Fund 227. As you can see, the top section kind of lists out the different capital planned items over the next, well, it's further than 2029, but this plan will just capture the amounts for anything through 2029. And then the bottom section kind of goes through the revenues, the expenditures, which would be your capital outlay, anything else, and then at the very bottom, it shows you the cash balances for each of the funds. So you can see for the Special Police Force, this would be kind of your squad vehicles, radios, anything that kind of has to do with more so the police department. So for 2023 actual, this fund had a cash balance of $175,000. And as you can see, over the next 5 years through 2029, that fund will grow to an estimated $215,000. So it's a good, healthy fund that'll help cash flow any of the future cash or capital projects. So moving on, we then see the ambulance fund on page 20. So this one is dedicated more so to the ambulance, and you can see that there is a planned replacement of the 2008 rig chassis. Same with this fund. It's the cash balance in 2023 at the end of the year was $337,000. And as you can see, even with the $100,000 that was in 2027 planned, the cash balance at the end of the 2029 projection is roughly $324,000. So it's very healthy to hopefully be able to cash flow the actual replacement in 2032 of the ambulance, estimated at $350,000. So moving on to page 22 of the plan, this would be your CASA 21 reroute project, Fund 447. As the project has kind of had some of those pre-construction costs. But in 2026, it's estimated, and this is like more so the street costs or the general fund portion, is at an estimated $423,000. This project for this portion is currently predicting the use of issuance of bonds in order to cash flow that project. As you can see, at the end of 2023, there was a negative balance just because there isn't any startup funds, and it does get positive in 2026 when the planned use of the bonds being issued there for this particular fund. And that's something that can be monitored as the year goes on. If that's the only portion that's being bonded for, which is what is kind of being portrayed in this this plan as of right now, the use of maybe some interfund loans or something could use to help offset the bonding if there's no other reason for anything, just because when you issue bonds, we typically like to see a little bit more than that. So just something to kind of keep an eye as 2026 approaches. Moving on to page 26, which would be the Capital Improvement Fund 801. So this fund, you can see, has a lot of capital that is currently being budgeted for, and as kind of things come up, let's see, I'm on the wrong page here, sorry. And as we kind of look to see kind of the health of this fund on page 28, you can see at the end of 2023, there was $461,000 in cash. Over the life of this fund is predicted to grow in order to help cash flow a lot of those capital items that are being slated for on this particular fund. So it's a very healthy fund that is monitored. There is a pumper truck that is being currently estimated in 2028 to replace for roughly $600,000. I know that one's a little bit more complex as you have some fire aid that would kind of come into play there. Any questions before I move on to the kind of the proprietary side? I know it changes a little bit in formats. So then if we go to page 30, this would be the Water Fund 601. Same concept here. The capital items are at the top. The CASA is kind of the most, is one of the larger projects slated for 2026. Since the fund is healthy, there is no current prediction to need to bond for the water funds portion of the CASA reroute project. So as you can see, this fund throughout the 2029 projection is meeting that minimum target cash balance, which is at the very bottom of the pages 30 and 31. At the end of 2029, you can see the estimated target that you would want in there is $340,000, and the prediction is just over the $1.6 million. So this fund would be able to cash flow all of the capital, along with maybe any other improvements that may arise here over the next 5 years as well. All right, moving on to page 32, this would be the sewer utility fund, kind of the same comments as the water fund. The CASA reroute project is planned in 2026 with no use of bonding for this fund as well. As you can see at the very bottom, the minimum target cash balance is met for all 5 of the estimated years. So not a whole lot kind of changing from last year to this year, other than just the CASA 21 reroute project. I believe the numbers have changed quite a bit since last year as you guys get kind of further into that with better estimates for that particular project. All right, moving on to the Stormwater Fund 604 on page 34. As you can see in this particular fund, one of the funds that we kind of need to watch here over the next 5 years, with the CASA 21 reroute project, there is nothing currently being predicted for bonding, along with the RIPRAP project that was talked about tonight. So those numbers will change a little bit. But as you can see with this fund, if we follow that minimum target cash on page 35, this fund does dip below the target cash. Since the cash is still a healthy 120,000 positive, we don't have the use of bonds in here just to stay above that. But just something just to kind of watch as the capital projects come up, if there was a need to bond and you would want to stay above that minimum target cash balance there, that would just be an area just to kind of watch there. And then the last two pages for the actual capital, 36 and 37 for the Refuse Fund 603. Currently, there's no capital items being planned, and the very little is currently being planned for this fund. So now I'm going to kind of jump back to kind of the beginning of the plan on page 12, which is going to be kind of the summary pages that will be the most use as you're kind of going through your budget process here over the next few months as you're kind of finalizing that up. So on page 12, we do have the cash fund balances, which shows for all of those funds that we just previously talked about, but also shows the general fund kind of at the top, along with special revenues and the debt service. So overall, all the funds are very healthy and they're adequate for the reserve levels, other than the Fund 604, the stormwater that we previously discussed. That one does dip below the target balance there, but nothing to be concerned at as of 2024. And then moving to page 13, which is the taxes levied and tax rates summary. So this one is a really good roadmap when looking at the next 5 years. You can see that the general fund, what is being predicted for the levy amounts that are needed. In order to ensure that the general fund is meeting the reserve fund policy of the 40%, those have been increased for the general fund just to make sure that you're within your fund balance reserve policy. And then along with all of the levies needed for all the debt service in order to make sure that you have next year's bond payments plus the 5 or 10% that is needed for those. Kind of in the middle of the page, you can see the percent change in net levy from the prior years. The 2024 and the 2025 estimated amounts, you can see the 6.9, which the council did approve as their preliminary levy. And then if you just kind of follow that across, 2026, there's predicted of the 5.94. If everything kind of goes to plan, along with 2027, you can see that one jumps up to almost 12%. That's more so just to make sure the general fund is in line with the fund balance policy. So that one could potentially come down just depending on how the overall general fund performs over the next 2 years. If you're putting funds into the fund balance, then typically that levy may come down just depending on where the overall fund balance is for the general fund. And then also just another item I wanted to note on this one, you can see in 2024, it's kind of it's in the tax rate section. For 2024, there's a 93.91% tax rate. I don't see that too often where the tax rate dips down there, but there was a TIF plan or a TIF district that did fall off that allowed you guys to capture some good net tax capacity in order to kind of bring that tax rate down. And then moving on to the last kind of schedules that we'll just highlight would be on page 14 and 15. And this is the outstanding debt schedule. So this is just a summary of all of the debt that is currently out there, along with any proposed, which would be the 2026 CASA Improvement Fund. And you can see at the bottom where it shows that in 2023, the total for all funds debt was just over the 17.7 million. And then as you can see through 2029 on page 15, that drops down to about just under 11.5 million. So some good, hopefully, debt buy down will be made over the next 5 years with the predicted plan as of right now. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is on page 7, just something to kind of highlight. We won't go through each of them, but as you can see, the assumptions there will just kind of list all of the different, obviously, assumptions that we used on here to talk about the different water and sewer rate increases with the new debt assumed. And then the housing, we also made a note on there that there is no assumed growth in the plan, but made the note as the city has been awarded the Workforce Housing Development Grant to develop multifamily complex units over the next couple of years. So just something to kind of note there, as those will then impact the overall numbers that are on that tax summary that we just discussed. Otherwise, key highlights, anything that we thought would need kind of attention for this plan, and then the financial goals remained pretty consistent with the previous year. I know that's a lot of information in a very short amount of time, so if there's any questions or anything that I can answer, I'll be happy to do that.
This is somewhat of a, it's a lot of numbers. It's almost like an audit in some respects, but, this is very useful for me. It does help me when I'm doing the budget and stuff like that, and also projecting. On page 13, Annette went over the tax levies and stuff like that. Kind of at the top, this would be page 109 of your packet. But there's the property tax levies for debt service. And so we're identifying in there the debt service obligations that we're going to have in the next 5 years. And to be honest, that's one of the things that really impacts our overall tax levy from year to year. These do fluctuate. We've already been utilizing some of those fund balances that we have in each one of them because they're so healthy. We're able to actually use some of those reserve monies from each one of those funds to help basically pay the annual bond payments that we have to do. That's paid off really well for us because it helps us to keep the levy overall down then. And so that practice, by looking at those, has really worked well. But from a budgeting standpoint, when you can look at those, these are actually real numbers here. So you can see for yourselves how the debt service fluctuates from year to year. And that will have some impact, depending on the year, of what our levy is going to have to be. This particular year coming up, 2025, actually some of these debt service funds, our obligations reduced. And then that did help with setting our preliminary levy earlier. So I just want to bring that to your attention. Overall, we want to incorporate the things that are really impacting our budget, like Annette went over initially, the equipment replacement schedule, our projects that we're working on. We want to get those in here, so we're planning for those things and also reflecting then how they impact our overall finances in the long run. So I think the plan itself is very good. We've incorporated all the things we think that we need to have in here that certainly have impacts on our fund balances in all of our accounts. So sorry for a lot of information there thrown at you at a short period of time, but as you're going through this in your leisure, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. Again, I do utilize this quite a bit. It's a very helpful tool for me when it comes to the budget. And that equipment replacement schedule, staff, we go through that every year. We tweak it as needed. So it's not just me, it's the department heads as well.
You look at some of those prices though, for example, the water trucks, they're saying $11,000 for a replacement. It doesn't seem like a lot of money to replace that vehicle, or even $35,000.
It's probably being split up by departments. It's they're utilizing it in more than one department, so they're all sharing in the cost.
And it's a very good tool because, with all of the other kind of cities and counties that we are also assisting, or that we hear what these preliminary levies are, it's not very common that you see single digits anymore with the kind of the inflation and just the overall increase in costs that we're experiencing. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air when you see, you have an average, under that double digits for what you're kind of predicting over the next 5 years. So it's a very good tool to have and to use.
Very nice report, yeah, living document, of course.
Awesome.
It's still a financial plan, subject to change, plans change.
Yeah, just a living document, things can change.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, Annette. We appreciate it. Okay, next thing on our agenda then is 11C, exempt status employees employment agreements.
This is an item that's come through the Personnel Committee, and they are recommending that the council would consider establishing employment agreements for all exempt employees. The city just has, only 3 positions that are actually exempt status, meaning that they are not subject to overtime. That would be the city administrator, my position, the police chief, and the public works director. All other positions of the city are non-exempt and qualify for overtime. I'm not going to go into how that's determined, but those things are, they qualify as exempt positions. So basically, one of our exempt employees, currently I'm the only one that has a contract with the city. The other 2 positions do not. And one of them came forward and requested that consideration be for a contract. Not so much, in fact, not at all to ask for additional benefits, but to request in the event that there would be a termination, that a severance package would be offered. And I put in your request for council action, I put in there, it's just some sample language, and actually that came right out of my contract, to be upfront. So that's the current language in my contract. So that's the consideration. The Personnel Committee had fairly lengthy discussion, and actually Mark happened to be passing through, and he got to sit in on some of that discussion as well. And, it really comes down to, those events, we're at-will employees. We can be let go more or less at any time from the council without necessarily, you could have a reason that might be argued later, but really you can come up with a reason that maybe it's just not working out anymore or something like that, or we don't feel this is a good fit anymore and we'd like to make a change. Mark probably could attest to this or maybe explain this a little better than I, but I think that's as simple as something like that. And I think for that reason, there's a little bit of insecurity in some of these positions, and that's why, it could be as simple as some sort of an event that they could be held accountable for, even though they might not have any fault in it, but they're still held accountable. Or there simply could be a changeover in the council, and they want to make a change. And I think that's part of the reason why some staff do request contracts now.
You're just looking for consensus, right?
Right.
Part of it makes sense. I mean, we got 3 of them. Why would we only have contract on one, right? I mean,
And that's what we kind of felt as a personnel committee, even though only just one department head requested it. It's like, we're going to do it for 2 now, we need to do it for all 3.
Yeah, so we would, how this would go is some consensus one way or the other, and then we put together agreements that would have to be approved by the council. But
council fine with that? Jessica, you good?
Just as long as they don't do something that's bad to get fired.
yeah, so, if, and the way that this language that Steve pulled from his contract is structured, if you're terminated for cause, so you're quote-unquote fired, then that wouldn't trigger these benefits. It would only be if you're let go, essentially. Whether it be a layoff, whether it be Steve's example of a new council that just decides to move on for whatever reason. So if it has to do with some sort of, improper actions in the capacity, it wouldn't trigger this clause. But if there's no basis, not no basis, but there's no grounds for releasing them and we're just parting ways, then it would trigger it.
Sounds good. Last item on our agenda is 11E. I think I said when we talked about approving tonight's agenda, that it's 11F. It's already on. Yeah, it's already updated. It's 11E on our paper copy of our agenda. So it's the Oaks Pavilion Rehabilitation Project, fee request number 8, final. And we have some forms that are tabled too, but I'll turn it over to Steve.
So, yeah, this is the final. It's application payment number 8 for this project. Total amount on, this would be, again, the final payment is $22,638. The remaining item that we were waiting on was the 2 exterior doors that had to be replaced. They have been replaced. They were painted. So at no additional cost to the city. So that's been taken care of. They've been installed, they look good, everything is good to go. So basically, we're ready at a point here to close out the project. Just to share with you briefly here, the total project cost. I'm not going to go through all the details, but basically, the project came in at approximately $500,000. That was our overall cost. That includes consultants that we hired, the trees that got removed out there. We also did a water and sewer extension that you may recall. That factors in that, as well as obviously the construction cost, or the contractor cost. So it's approximately $500,000, just under that. As far as from a revenue standpoint, we had a state grant. Again, that was approximately $262,000. We also had a lot of donations for this project. We had a couple grants that we received. I am including those grants in this total. Those grants were were $15,000, but overall donations were just under $143,000. So again, 15 of that was 2 grants. Basically, the city's cost on this is $94,000. So that was the bottom line. So at this point, I think we're at a point here where we're ready to close out the project, and not only from paying the contractor the final pay request here, but also then we'll go ahead and submit our final report to the State Historical Society to close out the grant and all that.
So we need a motion to approve the final pay request for the Oaks Pavilion Rehabilitation Project in the amount of $22,638.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Motion from Padilla, seconded by Moko. Any further discussion or questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Any closing comments or anything else?
There were just a couple more issues that we're working on out there, right, Steve? Some drainage stuff, perhaps, and some settlement.
Yes,
So
Yep.
that'll be coming back to council.
right. Unless we have an easy way to fix it, if we need to obviously expend any significant monies, we're still formulating a plan there.
Yep.
I just have a question regarding, that, the money we're spending on a televising, like, when will we move forward with the ordinance that now we're televising? We've made a significant step forward towards rectifying this problem, but now we have to have some teeth into what the next step is. When will we look at ordinance for the next step?
Yep, and that's a very good point. I would say soon here, that would be the next thing we'd be working on.
I mean, we're looking to Tony's point, next month, hopefully, we're looking at this, starting the approval process of the new ordinance and ready to go sometime in January, hopefully, right? I mean, isn't that kind of what we were talking about?
Yeah, I think we're within that time frame. Yep, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, it's a lot of money we're getting ready to spend.
Right, and I mean, in a couple months, we might have a handful of issues that need to be dealt with, and we need to have that in place before we can really do anything. Good point, Tony.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Eker. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Groko. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.